Nothing has changed my drag racing this year like the Sanwa M17 has. I've done a few videos about it. Now it's time to take a in-depth, deep look on what I'm doing and what you can do with yours. So let's get started. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Dorky and 40 RC channel. I'm Chad. First thing, thanks a lot for all the support that I got on the last video I did where I talked about the loss of one of our pets. I'm very touched by the outpouring amount of comments that people took the time to leave, and not very many people watch videos like that because it's not like, oh, here's how to go super fast and everything. So I know how many true fans I really have, and you guys all mean a lot to me. And as always, if you like what we're doing here on the channel, you can support us by using one of the Amazon links below in the description, or if you feel like it, you can also send me a tip with the paypal.me link in the description below. And to that guy that says that I'm begging for money by saying that, evidently you know nothing about YouTube creation, and I bet you're a horrible tipper at restaurants. So the M17, hate it, love it, whatever. I know there's still people that are trying to make common sense out of spending money on an RC radio. They just don't understand the power of it. Eventually, maybe you will, or maybe somebody will give us an option that allows you to do what this can do. I've went over it time and time again on, it's not just the settings in the radio, but it's just how the radio communicates with your ESC, how it reads the PWM inputs from your actual steering and from your trigger, and converts all that into fuzzy math and all that kind of stuff that our electronics can understand. Plus, it just feels really good, and it's a nice radio. Now that I've raced buggy with it, I wish the trigger pull was a little bit longer and it was actually easier to get to the brake, but that's for some stuff that we'll talk about down the road. So you want to go fast with drag racing. Well, the first thing you got to do with this thing is you got to figure out how to turn on and get Rmode set up. So we're going to go through that first. We're going to turn on Rmode. We're going to put it on a switch so that way you can switch through the various Rmodes if you want to. Kind of the whole like shifting gears thing. Then we'll get into talking about the ramps, the settings, all that stuff, custom curves. You know, I like to just put things in one big video, and that's what we're going to do. So if it takes us a half hour, it takes us a half hour. Let's get started. So I think the best way to kind of explain some of this stuff to the Sanwa is we're going to break out the old iPad here, and I'm going to draw some graphs just to kind of show you everything that's happening when you actually make these changes in the radio, so you can kind of get a better understanding of it. When you do things like with Expo and custom curves, you can actually see the graph. But just doing the basic stuff and understand how it's working is going to be what you want to do first. Don't jump into like using Expo and custom curves until you have your car dialed in, that you know at a certain speed and a certain point that your car is going to do X amount of seconds, time after time after time. Then you can start playing with changes. Even though I know a lot of you won't listen to me when I tell you that I ran my fastest times until recently using the custom curves. Now I'm just using the basic stuff. I'm not even using that. But there might be situations where you have to, and I need to. And that's the beauty of the Sanwa, is that you can go on there and make just a couple clicks of change and you're going to be all good. So this is the main screen of the Sanwa M17. Most of the things that you're going to do are going to be here in the actual settings menu. This is where things like your dual rate, your speed, which is your forward, your point, your in and out, custom curves, Expo, all that stuff. Everything is all buried inside of here. Just so everybody is on the same page. The terms dual rate and EPA kind of get confused in the Sanwa world. I've seen most people run their EPA at 100 and dual rate at 100, which is what I am doing with my throttle. But when you get into using the R modes for different shifts and everything like that, some people will actually cut that down into the 80s. If you've seen any of Mark Vine's videos, he talks about actually shifting and everything. I think he's just doing a couple things differently. Like maybe he's using a faster ramp and he's using the curve and he's using less of his EPA or 100% throttle. I have found success by just keeping it simple. I'll show you guys some advanced things to actually try, but the simple thing of just messing with your forward speed or your ramp is all the same thing. Your point, dual rate, EPA, those basic things is just pretty much what you need to do. But the first thing you got to do is you got to turn on Rmode. So what we're going to do is go into system, and then of course you're going to scroll down to where it says Rmode and press on the button, and you can set up however many you want. I have 4 set up, even though I'm only using 1 right now. And basically you can go through 3 or 4 times and set up all of this stuff. And make sure you don't do it under the steering and that you're under the throttle. That's one thing that will definitely trip you up. The other thing you can do is you can assign it to a key, which is pretty good and pretty easy. Just click key assign. I have mine assigned to this one right here. So when I press it down, it's going to cycle through, and this will go from saying Rmode 1 to Rmode 2 to 3 to 4, so on and so forth. Now, my recommendation for everybody to keep it simple is just to do everything in the settings menu. Don't worry about custom. You can set up a custom menu down the road when you actually get a little bit more involved with it. I have one set up here, but I don't even use it anymore. And you can see that it has all of the important numbers and that I was talking about. Our rate, our forward speed or our ramp, our point number, our rate, if we're using a throttle curve, and then the EPA. So keep it simple. Just do everything under the settings menu. Now, I want to refer you back to my Going Straighter video. Go and look at that, and I break down how I have everything set up for my steering. You are going to want to do that for your steering. If you're not using this with the same kind of throttle controls and ramps and points and everything that we did for the throttle with your steering, then you're just selling yourself short. The true power of this radio is being able to tune everything. I've said it in a few videos, but just in case you're new here, I have not flipped or rolled my car in months since I had this radio. Because of using those different steering functions, it has allowed me to control my car when it's out of control, even when it's slipping like crazy, or just drive it. And I've been in some situations where I've had to actually drive the car pretty hard. We all know they don't go A to B every time with just a trigger pull and not having to touch the steering. All right, nothing like technology to help us out here. So we've got to look at and understand what is going on inside this radio. And this is the best way to do it. So we got a graph of throttle percentage and time. So let's just look at, if you have a regular radio, doesn't have to be a Sanwa or whatever, and you don't touch anything in it or in the ESC, when you pull your trigger, everything is just going to move on a straight linear line, just like that. So when you pull your trigger over time, your throttle percentage is going to go up. Now, the great thing about the Sanwa is you could control that. So what you're going to be doing is you're going to be pulling your trigger to 100%, but we can make this thing do whatever we want. Initially, what's going on with mine now is it's going to start at 25%, and then it's going to go like this. So basically, this right here, this is the point setting. The very top right here, where you hit 100% or whatever, that is going to be your EPA setting. Whether you have it set to 100, 85, whatever you decide to set yours to. How it gets from point to EPA is going to be the speed or your ramp. So that's that negative number, negative 97 through, let's say, negative 93. Don't really know anybody that's going to use anything outside of that. So when we have a point setting of, let's say 25, which starts right here at 25. Now, depending upon what we put in our ramp, once you get your car figure out, you're going to figure this stuff kind of out for yourself. I know that if I do a negative 97 ramp, that it's going to take about 2.4 seconds for my car to hit 100% of my EPA. So I'm going to pull the trigger, it's going to jump to 25, and then it's going to ramp all the way up here, and that's going to take 2.4 seconds. I know a ramp of negative 96 and a point of 25 takes about 2.2 seconds. So what is going on is it's doing the same thing to hit 100, but what it is actually doing is it is applying it faster. So it's going to pull the trigger, it's going to start at 25, and then the ramp is going to be a little bit steeper because we're doing it in less time. Now, after a lot of testing and everything like that, I know that a ramp of minus 95 on my car right now is going to get me somewhere around 2.05 a second run if all goes well and I don't spin to hit 100 of my EPA. So again, we're going to pull the trigger, and this time it's going to go to 25, except it's going to be faster. Kind of see the pattern that we're going here. 94, 93, it's all going to decrease this time. We're still doing the exact same thing. Now, sometimes you're going to get stuck in a pickle, and this is where you're going to want to use things like custom curves. And instead of showing you and explaining it to you on the radio, which I will show you how to set that up, let's talk about it here, exactly what is happening. So there becomes a time where a ramp of 95, which is this steep, versus 96, which is that steep. 95 is too much, 96 is not enough. So my car will put down a good time at a negative 96, but at a negative 95, the thing starts breaking loose. I've already got my point set to like 20 or 25, so that's my launch point, and things are just not working out. So that is where you can start playing with curves. And you've got a couple different ways to do this. The first thing we can do is we can set up a negative expo curve. So what that would look like is we have our point value, let's say that it's 20, and we have our ramp, let's say our ramp is going to be negative 95 to get to 100. And then if we put in like, let's say a pretty steep curve of like minus 10 into the radio, what that would look like is instead of it being a straight line from there to there like we had before, now it will be actually a gradual increase. And if all things are going well, car takes it and everything's beautiful, we're going to put down whatever time that we're looking for. If you go back and look at some of Mark Vine's older videos, what he was doing with his RX-8 was he was using a positive curve. So he would have a point of say 20 or 25, and then a ramp of say minus 95, and then a positive curve of about, let's just say 15. So what that was doing was actually ramping this way. So instead of the line going out and up, the line actually comes up like that. So that would be a positive expo. So if we increase this number up to say 50, then it's going to pump all this up right here and make this go kind of like that right there. And then, of course, if we drop this down to minus 50, then we're going to get something that is inverted or something that takes a long time to go over like that. Now, the whole Jeff Zuccarello custom curve works a lot different. And This is how I hit my fastest ET before. But now that I've hit the 198, 199, just using the regular ramp, I'm good. The custom curve can really help you out, because what the custom curve is going to look like is the custom curve is going to kind of look like a regular type of throttle curve. Like when you build it in your radio, it kind of levels out and then it goes up like this. So you kind of have like this little dip. The thing is though, is that this point number doesn't really affect this anymore, because when you go into custom curves, you're going to get 9 points to put in. And he recommends starting maybe like around 34, 35. And you kind of keep the first ones like 35, 38, 42. And then you kind of like go up from there and increase it all the way to, of course, 100. What happens then with your point in the main menu is it kind of compresses this back and forth. So a point value of 1 will make it less aggressive, where a point value of 20 will make this custom curve more aggressive and kind of compress it and make it all happen a little bit faster. That's how you control and decide whether or not you want to run a -97 ramp, a -96 ramp, a -95. So this stuff can get a lot really complicated. That's why he's so good, because he spent the time and everything else putting into it. For most people, I recommend you just start with the basic way to do it. Then maybe if you want to, you can play around with expo curves and stuff like that. So run your car a bunch, figure out what ramp, -97, -96, whatever, we'll get your car dialed in at, say, like a 2.2 or a 2.3. Figure out whether or not you need to start at a point of like 20 or 25. And then, of course, depending upon what ESC and everything else that you're wanted, I always leave my EPA at 100. Some people will change that. Oh, and by the way, EPA and dual rate are kind of interchangeable in the Sanwa world, so that might confuse you as well. So, you just run it the basic way for a while and figure out what your car is doing. Don't try to go in and start using expo and custom curves right away, or you're just going to drive yourself crazy, because you're never going to know what your car is doing. So find a good consistent number that you're happy with a consistent ramp. So a point of like 20, 25, however much your car will take. You don't really want to go any higher. If you're going higher to like a point of 30, then you might as well try dropping down a ramp, because you're launching harder, so it's going to take it. So you might as well try seeing if you can get it going down the track. All right, now that we have our Rmode switch set up and we have Rmode turned on and everything, I recommend that everybody just sticks with the basic settings menu. Don't worry about the custom settings or nothing like that yet. So we can go into settings. Remember that your first little square here is steering, and then the next one is throttle. So this is my steering stuff, just in case you want to see. Here's that dual rate thing again. Now, just to show you that this thing could get a little confusing, you can see that I have my endpoint, my EPA, set to 65. So that means that out of 100% steering throw, we're only using 65% of it. When we factor in the dual rate, a rate of 61, that means that we're using 61% of 65. Now, why wouldn't we just lower it down even more? Well, we need it, so we're not going to do that. Speed. You've got the forward, which I kept referring to as like ramp or speed or whatever. Return, which we really don't use because that's when you let off your stick or your steering. And then we have point. So go back and look at my going straighter video, and I go over all of this stuff for the steering and try it out. You will not be disappointed. All right, guys, here is where we have everything set up for the throttle. So the first thing is you want to make sure that you have your endpoints set at 100%, whatever your throttle needs to be, your ESC's calibrated, all that kind of stuff. Every time that you pull the trigger, you're going to, 100% throttle, and same thing with reverse. Make sure it is all calibrated, because if it's not calibrated correctly, then everything else is not going to work right. So now let's go up to dual rate. So I have my dual rate set to 100. This is where people like Mark Vine and others use things like the gear shifting. So you can set this to 80, 85, 90, whatever. That means that you're only going to be using 80 to 85% of your 100. And depending upon how you have your timing set up, your ESC, your RPM range, this is going to differ. If you have an ESC like the DRK, generally your timing is not going to kick in until you hit 100% throttle. You can lower that down, I understand, but most people are not going to. So if you're never hitting 100% on your actual trigger pull, then you're never going to hit any of that stuff. So definitely keep that in mind. If you want to go ahead and change that, this is where you will do that, and you get into all the different Rmode stuff. So perhaps you will want to set up a dual rate of like 90, 95, and 100, and shift through those and make everything else that I'm going to show you the same in Rmodes 1, 2, and 3. Keep in mind, you got to do it for your steering too, so you can see where you can get into the weeds here and have to put a lot of work into it. So I am just got everything running at 100. It makes it simple. It's working. I don't have to worry about shifting and all this other stuff that people do. Yeah, I just don't need it. I mean, my car's running 2 flats. It's good. One of these days, maybe I'll deal with it. So now we go to the speed setting, and this is where pretty much all of the meat and potatoes are. You can see right now I'm running a ramp or a forward of -95. My point is 25, and my out is set, not in. So basically that means that it's gonna immediately go to 25%, and then it's going to ramp up to 100 at this forward rate of -95. And again, that's just kind of something that you have to work on with your car and see what -95 gets you. Through all the testing and all the runs I've done, I know that -95 is going to put me somewhere between a 205 and a 190 something. So a -96 is going to put me around a 2.2 to a 2.15 run. I rarely change my point because I just haven't found the need to do that yet at all. Curve. This is where everything can get super complicated, but super useful. So let's say that you are stuck in one of those situations where a -96 ramp is not fast enough, but your car is breaking loose at a -95. So the first thing that you can try is just running regular expo. And if we turn it up and say we're going to increase the expo, if you look at your radio, you're going to see what the curve is doing. So when I put in a positive expo curve, it's going to be really hard to show this stuff. I'm going to have to go and crank it like all the way up. But you can see how that curve is bending up like that. And I mean, this is pretty high. Now, if we go and turn this all the way down and do a negative expo curve, this is probably, I think, what more people are going to use, because most people are going to have a little bit harder of a time getting off the line. So now you can see how it's flattening out down here when we're adjusting that down. But again, you're going to want to go back and forth between this and a ramp. Now, let's say it takes a -20 to make that ramp of 95 work. maybe we'll want to try a ramp of negative 94 now. So we would go back into our Ford and we would go up here and change that negative 95 to 94 and see if that will work. Again, there's no set rules on this. It's whatever your car can do and handle. Now, if you click on the Expo thing there, this is where things get a little cool. So this is the custom curve stuff. And if you go over to CRV, that is custom curve, and you can see that I already have mine set up. I'll go over my points and stuff. Again, I wish it was easy to show and see, but if you look at the graph, you can kind of see how the one on the left there is a little bit of a kind of a dip right here in the middle. And the other thing to interest and look is you can see that there's an intersection of the two yellow lines, and they're not all the way over there. So if I pull the trigger, you can basically see what's happening there as far as the time goes. But check this out. If I go out of here and I go and change my point now to 0, you're gonna see that, well, you can only go to 1. Now look where that left line is. It's all the way over here at 1. You can't see it anymore. So it's uncompressing that custom curve. So at this point, when you're using custom curves, you can't think of this point number as your launch number anymore. You kind of got to think of it as a power number. So we're actually starting at 36 with P1, and we can go through these because I know everybody here is going to want to see it. So we've got P1 set at 36, then 42 for P2, P3 is 46, 52, and then P5 goes to 60, 69, 78, 88, 95. So we're never even hitting 100% throttle here. And if you see the yellow line, you could see how it's all moving together. Now I want to demonstrate to you one more time what would happen if when we change this point number again, so you can kind of see that. So let's just crank this baby all the way up to like 50. So you can see what I was talking about where it moves. Now, see it right there? See how it's all the way over here? And now when I pull the trigger, it's really jumping to that really fast. It's still hitting that P1, P2, and P3, but man, is it like accelerating like crazy. And if we look at the graph here, you could just see how crazy fast it is, but it's still only going to the first P1 that I have set. So I've went through my castle logs and verified exactly what's happening inside here. So don't worry, I'm not giving you bad information. That is exactly what it is doing when you are changing the actual point setting for the custom curve. It's basically just compressing the curve. It's not adjusting your actual starting point. I mean, I guess in a way it is, but it's not. It's really some trickery. And again, this is just really one of those things that you just have to know your car and you have to work a ton on, or you are going to just basically get yourself into trouble. So I would recommend, just if you are having a problem, again, being stuck in between the ramps, you think that your car can go a little bit faster, but 96 is a little too slow, 95 or 94 is just too aggressive, then just first try taking the edge off with the expo curve here by using a little bit of negative expo. Or if you think that I think that I really like 96. I just need a little bit more of a oomph at the beginning. Well, then give yourself a little bit of 5 or 10 positive expo and you'll be good. Now inside here, there's really nothing else that we're going to use. I have not played with any of these other settings. You know, there is stuff in here for like the anti-lock brake feature and stuff, which doesn't really seem to work. I don't use it. I just use drag brake and stuff inside my ESC, so I don't have to worry about that. Now, if you want to make things a little bit simpler, you can do a custom menu, and the custom menu will actually just pop up, I think pretty much like this without any addition. I think the only thing I did on here was either add point or curve. So I can go just to my custom menu here without going to settings, and I can change my ramp, I can change my launch point, I can change anything that I need to. And same thing with steering as well. And if we look at my R modes right now, like, you know, I'm clicking through the R modes. I don't have any of them set up any different just because that has came back to bite me. In fact, we better go ahead and double check that right now because we don't want to get out there and get stuck into something and have a bad run. So that is pretty much as I can explain it inside this radio here and with the graphs. So what do you think, guys? A lot, too much, too complicated? Anything else that I need to try to cover for you? Tried to break it all down as easy and simple as I could. Just don't get yourself into trouble for sure. Start with the basic stuff and find out where your car is. There's so many crazy questions on the interwebs that you just try to help everybody, and you know, it's a full-time job if you wanted to be on all the Facebook groups trying to help people. I see people like, you know, Mark Vine and other people adding stuff on there. Every time I try to help somebody by linking them to a video, they send me a friend request, and I don't really, you know, if you're part of my Facebook friend group, then you are a friend or you got in early. You know, now I just don't accept any of those just because, you know, people get mad at me for not responding to a message fast enough in the middle of a day. And that's just not fair. So if you have any comments or questions, go ahead and leave them here in the group on the Facebook. Go ahead and leave them below and everybody can chime in and take a look at it. And then we'll just kind of go from there. But besides that, I don't really know how else I can explain it or put anything else in there. Try to put everything that I have learned and seen into one video. So I hope this helps some of you, and maybe you've got something to add. And if you do, especially people like Jeff that might watch this, definitely add into the comments below or make a video that we can link. I can't link stuff from Facebook. It has to be from YouTube, obviously. And we can go that route. So thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate you sticking with me. Peace.